If you're already making money online with your coaching and info product business, in this video, I'm going to show you the exact system that the top coaches are using to make revenue at scale. And it's not through running, more ads. It's not through posting more content, and it's not through hiring a bigger sales team. It's through one specific mechanism that most coaches either don't have or aren't using correctly, and that mechanism is the webinar funnel. I spent time studying what the top coaching and info product businesses are doing and how they're structured behind the scenes, what they're running, and why it works. What they're running is a full conversion system built around the webinar with specific stages before it, during, and after it that turn your existing audience into consistent, predictable revenue. If you already have an offer, you already have an audience, if you're already making money, but you feel like you're leaving revenue on the table, then this video is for you. Now, here's why I can speak on this. I generated over 7 figures in affiliate commissions promoting The Real World by Andrew Tate, which is one of the fastest growing info products in the world at its peak. And I ran a marketing agency managing paid traffic and ad budgets for law firms all across the US. So everything that I've done is in the trenches of, conversion, traffic, and getting people to take action online. And that's the foundation that I'm bringing to this breakdown. Let's get into it. Now, let's talk about the revenue that you're leaving on the table. The way that most coaching and info businesses are selling has a fundamental limitation. They convert the people who are ready to buy and they ignore everyone else. Everyone else sees your offer, moves on, and that potential revenue disappears completely. VSL and DM funnels have a specific purpose in converting your audience, but they're built for people who are already close to becoming a sale. Most of your audience isn't ready, and those methods were not designed to nurture them. The reality is that most of your audience is curious, but they're not fully sold. They follow you, they consume your content, they know who you are, but this isn't enough to turn that into revenue without nurturing them more. Without a mechanism to move your audience from curious to convinced, they never convert. They keep watching, they keep engaging, but they never become your customer. This isn't really an audience or a traffic problem, it's a conversion problem. Now let's talk about why webinars are different. Most selling mechanisms work best when your audience is already close to buying, but a webinar actively builds the belief needed to get them into a buying decision. Nothing else matters or nothing else moves your audience from curious to convinced in a single session like a webinar funnel does. Think about what 2 hours of undivided attention with your audience can do for your revenue. Webinars create the perfect conditions for the deepest level of engagement around your offer. No other format gives you that. A story might get 3 seconds, a video can get, skipped. With a webinar funnel, you have the luxury of being able to spend, 1 to 2 hours with your audience, fully focused on what you offer, what your coaching program's about, and why your mechanism is the best to give them that desired outcome. In 2026, trust is at an all-time low. People have already been burnt by offers. They are more skeptical than ever before, and the trust from watching your content for several months can be matched with a single webinar funnel. VSLs, they rely on the viewer already being, nurtured enough to book a call, and long form educates the audience, but it rarely closes the viewer on high ticket offers on its own. A webinar is the only format that actively converts an entire room into customers. Now, I'm going to go into a stage by stage breakdown that's going to break down every single component of the webinar funnel from before the presentation goes live, during the presentation, and after the presentation when you have the post webinar sales window. Most people think webinars are 2-hour presentations with the pitch at the end, but it's actually one piece of a much more sophisticated system. What generates the revenue is the full conversion system built around it. Here's what that full system looks like. Registration page, indoctrination video, traffic strategy, show up sequence, the webinar presentation, post-webinar sales window, no-show sequence, retargeting, and post-purchase upsell. Every stage has a specific job, and we're going to go through that entire full system of the webinar funnel. Now, the webinar title is the first conversion point in the entire funnel. A weak title attracts the wrong audience, or it fails to get any registrants at all. The right title makes your ideal buyer feel like this will help them achieve their dream outcome. Now, your webinar needs to have a specific transformation, or it has to promise specific transformation to your ideal prospect. That specificity is what calls your ideal buyer and filters everyone else out. So what you want to do with the webinar title is you don't want to have this webinar be for everyone. You want it to be a very specific group of people, and you want to filter everyone else out, right? Because you don't want to, get people on the webinar who are not going to convert, people who are not actually, the right customer for your offer. You want to make sure that you only get people who are actually interested and would actually benefit from your offer. Now, a vague promise is what's going to, fill your webinar with people who are not your intended audience. So it's really important that you have a good webinar title and a good webinar promise. Most coaches send traffic to, generic opt-in pages, and they wonder why registrants are really low and why people are not, interested in attending the webinar. And what you have to do instead is whenever you make a high converting registration page, it can't just be a form. You have to pre-sell the webinar. You have to give them a reason to want to attend. Your audience must see the value in attending and understand why they can't miss the webinar. High converting registration pages also have a headline that leads with a desired outcome, a sub-headline that directly addresses the main objection holding them back from registering. So think about it, how to get XYZ result without having to do XYZ. So titles like that, they have, the desired outcome, and they also handle whatever objections they might have about the mechanism or about your offer. Each element serves one purpose, and it's getting them to register and eager to attend. After someone registers, they're going to land on the confirmation page. Most coaches have a blank thank you page. It just says, thank you for registering. We'll see you there. But that's honestly one of the biggest mistakes and one of the biggest missed opportunities that you can have in the entire funnel. The confirmation page is where you want to place an indoctrination video. It's a short video focused on belief shifting immediately after someone registers. So immediately after someone registers, they're interested, they're kind of excited to want to show up to the webinar and to learn more about your offer and to learn more about the mechanism. So it's a very good, moment to, sprinkle in some objection handling and also some belief shifting, right? Because what you want to do with the webinar is like the whole goal of the webinar is that you want to, shift the belief, whatever limiting beliefs they have, whatever misconceptions they have, whatever is like, holding them back from, committing to, the process or the transformation. You want to clear that up, and you can do this within the indoctrination video. And basically that's like the first piece of, nurturing that you offer within this entire webinar funnel. It makes them more excited to attend. It makes them more open to your offer before the webinar even starts. Inside this indoctrination video, you also get to reinforce that they made the right decision by registering. Then you begin installing the beliefs that they need in order to say yes to your offer before they even attend. Most coaches skip this entirely, but those who use it see higher show-up rates and higher closing rates. Before spending a dollar on webinars, you also want to have an organic promotional strategy. Instagram stories, email broadcast, email blast, whatever you want to call them. You want to have content CTAs to your existing audience. And this is how you get to validate your offer is working before you put money on it, right? The worst thing that you want to do is, spend a lot of money, spend thousands of dollars on an offer that you haven't validated. You're not even sure if this works with your organic audience. And if you can't sell to an organic audience that has been following you for months, maybe even years, then you're gonna have a hard time selling to a cold audience that maybe just found out about you for like days ago or even a week ago, right? So it's very important that you validate your offer. Paid traffic is what scales the webinar strategy. Retargeting captures the warm audience already engaging but not yet registered. Cold traffic expands your reach beyond your existing following and brings in new registrants consistently. So the idea that you want to have is that first, you want to start with organic, and you can, sprinkle in some retargeting, because retargeting is just going to, basically tap into your organic following and get more of these people who engage with your content to register and attend the webinar. Once you've already validated that it works with your organic audience and some retargeting, this is when you can start to promote with cold traffic. And cold traffic is one of the best ways to really scale the webinar funnel, because you're always going to be limited to your organic audience, to your following, if you keep doing organic. But if you can do cold traffic, you can tap into more followers, more registrants, and just keep, scaling the webinar funnel even more. Now, the coaches that treat paid traffic as an investment get disproportionately more results. Organic fills the room, but paid traffic is what's going to scale it even further. Making significant revenue with webinars always comes down to ad spend, because after you've exhausted, your organic following, you've already gotten a lot of your followers, a lot of your audience to join your coaching program. What you need to do instead is you need to, expand and, start to target some cold audience so that you can keep growing and keep making consistent revenue month over month. Now, the metric that tells you whether your ad spend and your traffic strategy is actually working, the cost per registered attendee. So cost per registered attendee is basically how much does it cost to acquire one person to register and to attend the webinar. This tells you whether your registration page is converting, the audience you want to reach. And when this number is dialed in, scaling becomes a very straightforward decision. Most people want more registrations, but go quiet into the day of the webinar. This is like one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people do. They want to get more people to come to the webinar. They want to get people interested, but they stop promoting the webinar, after a few days, and then they just, suddenly do the webinar, right? You don't want to do this. You want to make sure that you promote every single day leading up to the webinar with retargeting ads, emails, content, whatever it is that you have to do. Make sure that you promote every single day leading up to the webinar to make people hyped, to make people interested in wanting to show up and actually attend the webinar. What happens before the live webinar, like I said, is what's going to determine a massive portion of your show up rate. Now, these are going to be two sequences that you need to run during this window, and most coaches only run one. The first is the show up sequence. Reminder emails and text sent at specific intervals, calendar links, direct join links. This sequence alone can significantly increase your live webinar attendance because pretty much you're sending them constant reminders. It could be, 5 days before the webinar, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, or even 1 day before the webinar. And the day of the webinar, you want to send even more reminders to make sure they don't miss it. You pretty much want to make sure that people actually show up and people know where to go to come to this webinar. Now, the second sequence that you want to have is the belief shifting sequence. This is where the selling actually begins. By the time they show up, you want to make sure that they're already leaning towards a buying decision, right? The good thing about webinar funnels is that they help you, nurture and warm up the audience in those 1 to 2 hours. But what you want to do is you want to get them to be as nurtured and as warmed up and as, confident that you can help them before the presentation even starts, right? You want to have email sequences. You want to have that indoctrination video. You want to make content CTAs. You want to basically make them feel like this webinar is really important. They have to attend, and that this webinar could potentially change their life and help them, get the desired outcome that they want. Most webinar presenters start with, teaching frameworks, and then they pitch at the end. And that's why most webinars convert at a fraction of what they actually should. The right starting point isn't teaching, but it's, like I said, installing the beliefs needed to convert your audience. Before building a single slide, ask yourself this question. What are the beliefs that my prospects need in order to say yes to my offer? Every story, every teaching point, every testimonial, every example in the presentation exists to install those specific beliefs. You open by naming the exact pain your audience feels every day, the specific painful situation that they've been in that they haven't been able to solve on their own. And when they hear that someone described their exact situation, they're going to stop everything and they're going to pay close attention. Then you reframe why that exact problem exists, because they've been operating on false limiting beliefs that are stopping them from getting the desired outcome. And this reframe is what's going to make your solution feel like the only logical answer. Understand that you're not selling a program, you're selling a transformation. From the painful situation that they're stuck in to the outcome that they've been chasing, your offer is the bridge from where they are and where they want to go. The offer is built piece by piece throughout the entire presentation. Each component gets introduced as the direct solution to that specific problem. By the time you state the price, by the time you pitch, they've already said yes to each piece individually. They've already said yes to the mechanism. They've already said yes to your coaching program. They've already said yes to you. And now when you state the price, it's basically a no-brainer that they want to, get the transformation. They want to join. They want to get that outcome that you have promised in the presentation. Objection handling is woven into every single story, reframe, and piece of proof throughout the entire funnel, right? You don't want to just have one section at the end where you do all the objection handling. You want to basically do it with every testimonial, every case study, every story, every example, everything inside the webinar has to be handling objections, right? You want to choose the testimonials, the case studies that are going to, address a specific objection, right? And you want to put that inside the presentation. So by the time you get to the, the Q&A section or the objection handling phase of the webinar, you've already done a lot of the heavy lifting. Every part of the system is doing the objection handling work, whether audience is aware of it or not. And this makes sure that every limiting belief is handled before you ever pitch them. So by the time the pitch comes, it's a pretty easy sale. Now, the Q&A section is where you handle every remaining objection. When someone asks you a question and you address the belief behind it in real time, every objection that someone, voices out loud, everyone that, asking questions in the chat or, so on, you get to, address the objection that a lot of other people are silently holding, right? Because there's a lot of objections that maybe you've already addressed on the presentation, maybe in the Q&A section it was answered, but there's also, some objections that just aren't covered covered inside the presentation. So during the Q&A session, you can basically answer those final objections. And when someone asks you a question, it's usually a question that 10, 20, 30, or even 50, or even 100 people also have. So when you go through the Q&A section, you're going to, address every single objection that people might have. When you answer one person's question, you're answering, 20, 50, 100 people's questions at once. Now, once the webinar ends, you enter the highest conversion window in the entire funnel. Those 48 to 72 hours after the live webinar is when the buy intent is at its peak, right? Because everyone that, went ahead and booked the call or went to the checkout page and bought your program, those are the warmest leads. Those are already converted, but there's going to be a lot of people who are on the fence. They're thinking about it. They're considering it. They want to join, but they're not sure yet. So it's really important that you capitalize on these people, because your ability to be able to, capitalize on those people who are on maybes or considering is what's going to really influence your revenue, right? Because everyone can close the easy, lay down sales, the warm people who really trust you and they already, know a lot about your offer. They already know a lot about you. Those people are super easy to close, and you would have closed them with the webinar funnel and without the webinar funnel. But those people who are maybes, those people who are considering it, those people who are thinking about it, that's where you make the money. That's where you get to, use the webinar funnel to close even more people than you can with these other funnels or these other methods, right? A significant portion of that total revenue is going to come from this sales window. In the post-webinar window, you send replays to everyone who did not attend. You also send value and urgency emails to reinforce the transformation and to keep the offer deadline top of mind, right? You want to have a deadline, because without the deadline, people are just going to think, okay, I'll join next week, I'll join next month, I'll join next year, right? People are always going to have, a reason why they want to postpone it. So with this deadline and with those emails you're going to send after the webinar, that's how you're going to get people to, remember, hey, this bonus offer or this limited time discount or this, program, it has limited spots. So they have to join now or they're going to miss out on this opportunity. Each email is placed at a specific time for a specific reason, and it's to convert that audience. Now, the sales window closes at a hard deadline, like I said, with a real consequence for them waiting. Without the deadline, there's no urgency to move forward and the audience to take action right now. But when you run this correctly, this window generates more revenue than the entire webinar presentation itself. And the reason for this is because, like I said, the good thing about the webinar funnel is not those easy laid down sales that you get on the presentation. It's about the sales that come after the webinar, right? Because these are the ones that maybe wouldn't have converted with the VSL, with the DM funnel, with the application form that you can convert with the webinar funnel, right? Because all of this is like one complete system. The presentation, the follow-up sequences before the webinar, and the sequences after the webinar, all of it is like one whole strategy that allows you to convert people that you normally wouldn't be able to convert, because you just have a full system, to nurture, warm up, build trust, and to convert these people who are maybes, considering, or maybe they're just, thinking about it, right? That's the beauty of the webinar funnel. Now, the majority of the people who register are also not going to attend. And what you want to do is that you want to get these people to watch the replay. You want to get these people inside your funnel, because even though they missed the webinar, they still have intent. And that intent does not disappear simply because they missed the live session. You need a no-show sequence built specifically to bring those people back into the conversion funnel. The no-show sequence delivers the replay so they can still consume the content. It reestablishes the offer with the closing deadline to move them to take action, right? Because a lot of people, they're going to want to come to the webinar, but for whatever reason, they're not going to be able to make it. So with the replay, you can get them to watch the entire video, the entire replay, and you also give them that offer. You also give them that bonus, and you give them that same hard deadline. They're going to end up converting. And this allows you to convert a lot of people who never attended a single minute of the webinar, but they went through the replay. After the webinar, there are warm leads who considered buying, like I said, and they didn't buy. They know who you are. They watched the presentation. They were so close to saying yes. You can retarget this group. It's going to allow you to convert a lot of potential customers that you would otherwise permanently lose, right? So after the webinar presentation, after the sequence, after the post, webinar sales window closes, you want to retarget these people. You can send them, specific email sequences. You can retarget them to your VSL. You can retarget them to more of your content. And eventually these people will convert. And even though they don't convert off this webinar, maybe they don't convert off the emails, that are part of the webinar funnel, the fact that they came to this webinar, the fact that they saw the replay, the fact that they went through these email sequences, you might get them to, eventually, close and become a client 1 week from now or even a month from now, right? So even though the webinar might not convert to people, you do a lot of heavy lifting and you really accelerate the sales cycle by having a webinar funnel in place. Retargeting is about staying visible to an audience that has already demonstrated interest. Warm audiences convert at a significantly higher rate than cold traffic for a fraction of the cost. This is one of the most simple and highest return moves in the entire funnel, because when you run ads or when you have an organic strategy to get people to register for the webinar, you now have their email, you have their phone number, you have their data, you have the ability to keep retargeting them, keep sending them your content, send them to your VSL, send them to other content, send them other resources to get them to convert, right? These are now your leads, and you can keep blasting, emails to them, getting them to, come to the next webinar, come to the VSL, watch a video, get a free resource, whatever, right? You can basically keep, promoting to this lead and nurturing them, and then eventually they'll become a customer. When someone buys from your webinar, most coaches consider the transaction complete, but the moment after the purchase is when the commitment and trust are at their highest point. That window is one of the most underused revenue opportunities. A post-purchase offer presented immediately after the initial sale converts at a very high rate. The resistance is at its lowest point because they've already said yes before, and adding this one step increases revenue per customer without having to add a single new lead, and it allows you to make the most revenue, get the highest LTV, whether it's organic or paid traffic. You can just squeeze out more money from every single registrant just by having this post-purchase upsell. Now let's talk about whether this webinar strategy will work for your business. This is the full webinar system that I described in the last section, every stage, every component, and what each one does. And at this point, you might be wondering whether this system like this, or whether a system like this could work for you. And let's address the most common concerns that coaches have before moving forward. A common concern is that this strategy only works for coaches with a large audience. And although audience size matters, it matters less than audience quality and the relationship you have built with your audience. An engaged following will consistently outperform a massive but inactive following in the webinar. Another concern is that this only works in certain niches or for certain types of offers or for certain markets, but that's not true. The webinar funnel works because it's built on buying psychology, not niche specific tactics. The sequence of building belief and presenting a transformation applies regardless of the niche. Many coaches have run a webinar before and they didn't get the results they expected, and a failed webinar is almost always because they were missing one or more of the stages that I just described in this video. Running it without the full system will lower the results of an offer that would otherwise work with the webinar strategy. Now, time concerns are valid because this system takes, a significant amount of time if you build it yourself manually, but this strategy or this webinar strategy can be implemented and managed by another team. All you would have to do is show up, present, and everything else is handled. You have a complete picture of what every stage of the system looks like, every component, and a specific job within the webinar funnel. If you want to implement this, here's what the next steps look like. We get on a call and we look at your current setup, your offer, and your audience. We talk about whether this is the right move for your business at this stage. If this makes sense, we handle the entire build for you from start to finish. Every page, every email sequence, every component of the funnel gets built specifically for you, custom to your offer, your audience, and your niche. And your only job is to show up and deliver the webinar. Now, the only thing left to see is whether this makes sense for your specific situation. The calendar link is below in the description. Book a call and let's talk about what this could do for your business. And remember, this webinar strategy is very complex and it takes a lot of time to build. So I can only work with a handful of coaching and info businesses. So if you're interested in working with me, you're interested in, implementing this webinar funnel into your business, make sure you book a call because I'm not going to be able to help everyone because, like I said, I have AI, I have virtual assistants, I have a team that helps me build all of this, but I'm still limited to how many people I could take on because, like I said, it's a very, time intensive, very complex, system that I have to build out for you. So again, go ahead and book a call and we can talk more.